Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Oyitayo. On the programme this week, Nigerians fear consequences of sanctions following military takeover, plus Sudanese refugees continue to cross into Chad with harrowing stories. Niger is the latest country in West Africa to experience a military coup. Major cities in the country are now facing rolling blackouts following sanctions imposed by regional bloc ECOWAS. Though some Nigerians have vocally supported the coup, many are increasingly worried about the consequences following suspension of aid by several international partners. The bustling market streets of Niger's capital, Niamey, remains heavy with uncertainty, as small business owners fear the coup that overthrew their president could halt financial flows into the West African country.
We're particularly concerned about the financial barriers because in our experience, when there's a coup in a country, the financial institutions either refuse to help or they compromise little on the way they help the country financially. So we believe that this could happen to our country. What we want is for the situation to be restored as quickly as possible. That's really our concern.
Regional bloc ECOWAS has already imposed sanctions, including a halt in all financial transactions and a national assets freeze.
In the meantime, the following measures are to be applied with immediate effect. 1. Closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger. 2. Institution of ECOWAS no-fly zone on all commercial flights to and from Niger. Suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Niger. Freeze all service transactions, including energy transactions. Freeze assets of the Republic of Niger in ECOWAS central banks. Freeze of assets of the Niger state and the state enterprises and parastatals in commercial banks. Suspension of Niger from all financial assistance and transactions with all financial institutions, particularly EBID and BOAD.
The EU and France have also cut off financial support, and the United States has threatened to do the same.
Let me be very, very clear about this, as I have been in my phone conversations. Our economic and security partnership with Niger, which is significant, hundreds of millions of dollars, depends on the continuation of the democratic governance and constitutional order that has been disrupted by the actions in the last few days. So that assistance, that support is in clear jeopardy as a result of these actions, which is another reason why they need to be immediately reversed.
Niger relies heavily on foreign aid, and sanctions could further impoverish its more than 25 million people. According to the World Bank, the country receives close to $2 billion a year in official development assistance.
I think these sanctions were initially taken in the heat of the moment. We can't be any poorer than we were. In 13 years, we haven't seen a single franc from our oil. We've even been told it's worthless, all that stuff. So now, what's going to happen is that people are also imposing a blockade on us. Because they are closing their borders, it will worsen the situation for people.
En 13 ans, on n'a pas vu un seul franc de notre pétrole, l'uranium, on nous a même dit que ça me fout.
Parce que je crois que la CEDEAO avait...
ECOWAS sanctions were to be expected. It's true that these sanctions are very heavy, and I think we're really going to suffer economically. It's going to be a very difficult time for the country.
The coup, the seventh in less than 3 years in West and Central Africa, has undermined democratic progress in the region.
Ce jour, 26 juillet 2023,
the military takeover began unfolding on Wednesday, July the 26th, when soldiers confined President Mohamed Bazoum to his palace. 2 days later, the military declared General Abdurrahman Tiani the new head of state. The move has been widely condemned by neighbors and international partners. Leaders have also refused to recognize the new military junta.
On Wednesday, Africa suffered a serious setback in its democratic gains as the aspirations of the people of Niger for constitutional democracy were subverted by an unconstitutional change of government that deposed Mohamed Bazoum, a democratically elected president. The Republic of Kenya joins the rest of the world to condemn in the strongest terms this unconstitutional act that subverts democracy through a coup d'etat and calls for the immediate release of President Mohamed Bazoum, who is reportedly seized by members of the Presidential Guard. In this moment of strife, we implore all parties to engage in constructive discourse to restore peace in this fraternal nation, which has steadfastly stood as a bulwark against terrorism and its agents in the Sahel region.
Niger's coup follows takeovers in neighboring Mali, Burkina Faso and Chad since 2020. All 4 countries of the Sahel region are now ruled by military leaders.
I am indeed extremely worried. If you look at the region, you have a dramatic terrorist increase of activity in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and coming closer and closer to the countries of the coast. You have military regimes in Mali, in Burkina Faso, now eventually in Niger, a fragile transition in Chad, and an horrible situation in Sudan. So we are witnessing that the whole belt south of the Sahara is becoming an extremely problematic area with terrible consequences for their populations and with terrible consequences for peace and stability in the African continent and further afield. So this is indeed another symptom, another, I would say, very dramatic event that only benefits the terrorist groups operating in the area that are becoming more and more dangerous everywhere.
The military leaders of neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali voiced their support for the coup on Monday and warned that any military intervention will be considered a declaration of war against their countries too. It comes after ECOWAS said all measures, including the use of force, are on the table to restore constitutional order in Niger. Meanwhile, the latest coup has sparked renewed demonstrations against former colonial power France, echoing a growing wave of resentment also seen in Burkina Faso and Mali. France, as well as the United States, Germany and Italy, has had troops in the region for a decade, helping to fight a jihadist insurgency. But some leaders in the region want the former colonial power to stop interfering in their affairs. On Sunday, supporters of the military leaders attacked the French embassy in the capital, breaking windows and setting its compound walls on fire. Supporters were also seen holding flags as Western leaders raised concerns that West Africa's latest military takeover could open the door for greater Russian influence in the region. Still in West Africa, thousands of people are crossing each day from Sudan's Darfur region into the small border town of Adre in Chad, with many arriving injured and with harrowing stories of the violence they've escaped. While Chad has kept its borders open, the arrival of tens of thousands of refugees in 4 months has put immense pressure on already stretched public services and resources. Patients at this hospital in Chad's border town Adre fled violence in Sudan's Darfur. Mohammed Adam is the father of a wounded child.
I went ahead and told my family to follow me. In the middle of the road, forces found my children and they were run over by a car, killing my wife and son. My girl was also run over by the car. Thank God, she is here now and is recovering.
Clashes between rival military factions in Khartoum have triggered an increase in ethnically targeted violence in Darfur. Witnesses say those trying to escape to Chad on foot have been shot at.
In the morning, even they attack us, and during they attack us, and in the roads they took us everything, money, food, clothes, and even they killed, the relatives and the friends. That was difficult time because they did, such horrible things.
In our way to Adere, we find them also like dead bodies. They kill people, those whom were like coming to kill people. So they were in the road with motorbikes, with like guns and with cars. So they enter houses and they take a lot of things that we have. We don't have other things, only the clothes that, as you see, these are the one that left, but the other one are looted and stolen.
So, and then the majority of patients that we have are those who sustained injuries with the gunshot, and then they present with open fractures, with infected wounds, and then with abdominal injuries that we have managed so far in the hospital.
But it's not just bullets that are threatening lives. Many, especially children, arrive in the severe or late stages of malnutrition. A recent global heat wave and unprecedented high temperatures is also making it even harder for refugees.
We estimate now, UNHCR and the government, that some 100,000 have already crossed in Adre city. They are being relocated. Today we are here doing a food distribution where we will give them a minimum ration for 1 month to assist. They are mainly women and children, as you can see. They really need shelters. They're coming with nothing. And look at the weather today. It's a sun mixed with rain. It's very terrible. They're coming with nothing. And we cannot leave the government of Chad responding alone to that response. It's massive. So we really need to help. And those people really, really need our help.
So far, more than 230,000 refugees and 38,000 returnees have crossed into Chad from Sudan since the start of the conflict in April 2023. According to UN estimates, more than 3 million people have been forced into displacement inside and outside the country. Since May, Saudi Arabia and the United States have been leading negotiations between the Sudanese warring parties in the Saudi Arabian city of Jeddah. Several truces have been reached and breached since then, with the two sides accusing each other of violating them. When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, we take a look at Ukraine's counter-offensive as troops battle to retake key areas occupied by Russia. Thanks for staying with us on the program. After 2 months of slow progress on the battlefield, Ukraine appears to be escalating its counter-offensive, ramping up the deployment of extra troops to the southern front and signaling a new phase of the operation. Forces have been slowed by minefields and intense Russian resistance, but several settlements have recently been liberated in the Donetsk region.
This video released by the Ukrainian army shows its soldiers in battle near the village of Staromayorsk, which was recaptured from Russian forces last week. The Marines who fought in the battle, Ukraine's biggest advance in weeks, described the fighting as brutal.
It was difficult. The Russians waited for us. They shot anti-tank weapons and grenade launchers at us. My car drove over an anti-tank mine, but everything is well. The vehicle held the heat, and everyone came out of it alive.
Kiev's current counter-offensive is backed by billions of dollars in Western military aid, equipment and training. But war stories of the battle near the front line in southeastern Ukraine give an indication of why this highly anticipated operation has proven slower and bloodier than expected.
We advanced slowly but surely. What can I say? They shoot, everything flies. It was scary, but we moved on. Nobody backed up. Everyone did a great job. Many of us didn't come back, but we mostly preserved our strength.
Ukrainian commanders say the deliberately slower pace is needed to avoid high casualties. Russia on Monday announced that Ukraine's counter-offensive is not going as planned and that the country is wasting billions of dollars of weapons supplied by the West.
Amid the failure of the so-called counter-offensive, the Kyiv regime, backed by its Western sponsors, has focused on carrying out terrorist attacks on civilian infrastructure.
Meanwhile, members of the United Nations Security Council have once again urged Russia to withdraw its troops from Ukraine's internationally recognized territory.
We should never lose sight on the root cause. We all know the indisputable fact that if Russia had not initiated the current aggression, the tragedy we are witnessing now would never have happened. Russia must stop its hopeless attempt to deceive the international community. It will never justify its outrageous act. Instead, it should fulfill its responsibilities as a permanent member of the Security Council.
Since the beginning of Russia's brutal, full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the international community has been clear. Over 140 countries have repeatedly condemned the Russian Federation for its aggression against Ukraine and demanded that Russia withdraw its military forces from Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. We've listened carefully to Russia's remarks, and it's clear that its efforts to divert the Council's attention from the core issues at hand are a transparent ploy to distract from its own aggression.
Russia's claim that it is Ukrainian aggression that is in any way responsible for the ongoing war in Ukraine is absurd. It is a projection of the behavior of the Russian state itself. There is only one aggressor in this war. We have all seen hundreds of thousands of Russian troops invading that sovereign country, illegally and unprovoked. We all know that the right to self-defense in those circumstances is enshrined in the UN Charter. And it is Russia that is sending thousands of its own young men to their deaths. Estimates suggest that more than 200,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or injured in Ukraine. Russia is inflicting terror on the Ukrainian people, and in parallel, it is inflicting suffering on its own population.
Russian aggression against Ukraine presents the gravest threat to international peace and security. But as dangerous is reluctance of the world to employ force and accountability mechanisms to stop the aggressor. Ukraine remains steadfast in its pursuit of liberating its sovereign territory within internationally recognized borders and freeing our citizens from the horrors of Russian occupation. This endeavor is not just a right, but also a duty.
On Monday, 2 people were killed and 4 injured, according to Russian officials, in Ukrainian shelling of the city of Donetsk, which is under Russian control. Some 250 miles to the west, smoke billowed from a gaping hole in an apartment building. According to Ukraine, a Russian missile attack on the city killed at least 6 people and wounded dozens more.
Over to South Africa now. The electricity minister says there's been significant strides in the implementation of the country's energy action plan. The plan, initiated by President Cyril Ramaphosa in July 2022, aims to swiftly secure the nation's energy future amid the ongoing challenge of load shedding.
It's been a year since President Cyril Ramaphosa introduced the Energy Action Plan in order to tackle the country's energy crisis. During the weekly media briefing on the government's Energy Action Plan, Minister of Electricity Hosientshu Ramakgopa stated that there's been a significant 1,100 megawatts improvement in the country's generation capacity for the month of July.
The period of July, on the generation side, we had improved by approximately 1,100 megawatts. I did say the last time that, just to understand, put this into EAF performance, approximately 1 percentage point increase amounts to about 477 megawatts.
Energy expert Chris Yellen says he appreciates the minister's confidence and his willingness to make a commitment that he can be held accountable for.
He is bringing a new energy, a new urgency to this matter, and a new accountability. Whereas previously you had all these different government departments and Eskom and municipalities and the regulator all sticking to their own lane, their own silo, instead of having somebody who could cross the boundaries of all these different government bureaucracies and getting them to work together as a team. This business of sticking to your lane is the wrong approach. The right approach is what I'm seeing now, where the minister is crossing the boundaries of these different silos.
According to Yellen, we're likely to see more improvement in the second quarter of 2024.
In my projections, I always allow a little bit of safety factor because, you know, you're bringing on units that were broken down and they've been broken down for a year. Now, sometimes it's harder to bring those units back on stream than you might think. In other words, they might bring it back onto the grid and then it trips out again. And it takes a bit of time to settle down and get these units running in a stable fashion. So I say let's look towards the first half of next year, where we should be seeing a significant reduction in the intensity of load shedding. I don't think it's going to be over, but I think the intensity will be reduced in the first half of next year. And in the second half, there's this extra unit from Medupi that's coming on, and an extra unit from Kusile, that's Kusile unit number 6.
The Democratic Alliance Shadow Minister of Energy in Parliament, Kevin Melham, says the progress is encouraging, but much more still needs to be done.
We need to see transmission infrastructure upgraded and brought online as quickly as possible. We need to spend somewhere in the region of 210 billion rand increasing our transmission capacity, particularly from the Western and Eastern Cape and Northern Cape, the areas where solar and wind are predominant, so that they can transmit the energy that is generated from those areas to where it's needed, primarily Gauteng and the inland central regions.
In the past financial year, Eskom incurred a substantial cost of 14.7 billion rands due to gas open cycle turbines. Meanwhile, Kusile power station units are projected to be operational around December 24, 2023. Despite these positive developments, load shedding persists in the country. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Simosa, for Foreign Dispatches.
And that's the program today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.